Arthur Tunn tells of an overnight visitor to the White House during the Coolidge administration. Those of you who know your American history will say that Calvin Coolidge was the 30th President of the United States from 1923 until 1929. He was not one of the warmest people around, apparently. He was well known for his brevity and taciturn nature. Seated at breakfast with the President, the visitor determined to be as invisible as possible, or any possible digressions of etiquette that he might perform. All went well until President Coolidge began to catch on as to what was happening. Reaching for his coffee, the President poured some of it into his saucer. The visitor followed suit. And then the President reached for the cream and poured a generous amount into the saucer, and the visitor did the same. And then the President bent down and placed the saucer on the floor for the cat. There is a difference between those who fake it and those who are real. Over the years, 35 I think I remember, as a school chaplain, I used the story of the Velveteen Rabbit written by Marjorie Williams. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's a lovely story to introduce children and young people to the concept of what it means to be real and loved. In this story, a little velveteen rabbit is loved by a small boy. It was once new and shiny as he received it on a Christmas morning, and it lived in the nursery and talked to the other toys that were there. The mechanical toys felt especially superior and pretended that they were real because they had springs and wheels and could move. The rabbit asked one of the toys, the skin horse, who was the oldest and wisest toy, "What is real? Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long time, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the horse. "But when you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the horse. "You become. It takes some time. That is why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily or who have sharp edges or who are carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and you look very shabby. But these things don't really matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand. In Mark's Gospel, as opposed to Luke's Gospel, where the aim is taken by Jesus at the Pharisees' privileges, the Markan Gospel takes aim at some anonymous scholars. In Jesus' day, there certainly were scholars in Galilee. And in Mark's Gospel, it may be understood as an indictment of a certain kind of scholar, those whose piety was always on parade and who insisted on certain social advantages because of their status, such as being properly addressed and receiving the best couches at banquets and the best seats in the synagogue. I often wonder whether it's a good thing to call me Rev. That's what social advantages do you get today being called Rev? You just get ugly looks from most people. Well, this kind of public performance is not unknown in other societies among the learned. who have been deprived of political power and wealth. The scribal parade of pomp and circumstance is a plausible setting for this fierce and stinging criticism by Jesus. Many of you may have seen the science fiction action film called The Matrix. It depicts a dystopian future in which humanity unknowingly is trapped inside a simulated reality, the Matrix, created by thought-capable machines to distract humans while using their bodies as an energy source. When computer programmer Thomas Anderson, under his hacker name Neo, uncovers the truth or the reality, he is drawn into a rebellion against all of these machines. There's a famous line from the movie said by Morpheus to Neo. "Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you weren't able to wake up from that dream? How would you know the difference from the real world and the dream world? How would you know the difference?" When we say to someone in our Australian idiom, "get real," we are wanting them to be fair dinkum, another Australian idiom. The quest for authenticity or being real is in part related to achieving some measure of autonomy and freedom, to the desire to be the architect of our own life. And striving for personal authenticity provides an antidote to those outside influences and to some extent is a reaction to the inauthenticity we see in culture, religion, politics, and everyday life. Becoming real or authentic is an individual mission, since each person has their own way of being human, and consequently what is authentic will be different for each individual. But the unique nature of each individual is best seen not in who we are, but in who we become. And that is a continuous process, not an event. If the quest for personal authenticity is just for self-fulfillment, then it is individualistic and ego-based. But if it is accompanied by or with the awareness of others and the wider world, then it can be a worthwhile goal for us. The concept of authenticity has been explored throughout history by many writers, from ancient Greek philosophers to Enlightenment authors, to existentialists and contemporary social theorists. The idea of authenticity, of course, is a human construct, but it is possible, or is it possible, or is it even desirable? The question is possibly misleading, as it implies an absolute yes or no answer. None of us can achieve absolute authenticity. Some argue that authenticity is impossible to achieve as an ongoing state of being, since any real authenticity is transient and impossible to maintain indefinitely. So we all undergo changes throughout our life with the deluge of interpretations and observations, and therefore attaining some measure of personal authenticity or being real is a lifelong project that may never be fully accomplished. Society, of course, is always telling us Christians, get real, or why don't you live in the real world? To the secular world, much of what we do here seems sadly out of touch with the real world. I've heard people say to me, you religious people need to get out of your pie-in-the-sky thinking and face some facts or reality. But it does beg a prior question of, well, who gets to define reality or authenticity? Who gets to name the facts of life? Do we allow reality TV shows to do that for us? Or the media and social media to define reality for us? Or do we allow our politicians to define reality? Of course, where many politicians and commentators say that there's no human input into climate change, or that people can live on $40 a day, we can all allow political parties to define reality for us. There is a famous story in Plato's allegory of the cave, some of you may be aware. He suggests that we are all like prisoners who are chained to the floor of the cave and forced to sit all day facing the back wall of the cave. We can't move our heads to the right or to the left. All we can do is stare at the back wall of the cave. And behind us, at the entrance of the cave, people move back and forth, and we can see their shadows reflected on the wall of the cave in front of us. And that is all we can see, their shadows on the wall of the cave. If we could be released from our bonds and turn around and look towards the mouth of the cave, the bright light would blind us, but gradually our eyes might become accustomed to the light, and we would be able to see things as they really are. But it would be a long and painful process of gaining our sight, of seeing things as they really are, of seeing reality. For now, all we have got are shadows, mere silhouettes, and outlines of things as they are. And Plato argued that reality, in the most profound sense, belongs not to the physical world, but to the archetypal world of ideas, or what he called forms, of which the world perceived by our senses is a pale reflection. And for 1,000 years, Eastern philosophy has contended, of course, that the universe, as it presents itself to our senses, is just an illusion. It's not real. Here are some suggestions then, as I finish, about what you can do to be real. First of all, don't lie. Being real is at its core about being in total integrity with what is true for us. We're happier and healthier when we live our truth. Let your body point you towards what is true for you. Sometimes it feels really hard to know who we are and what we want, but our bodies will always already know what we're feeling, even when we're not conscious of it. Stay in your own truth and out of other people's business. Authenticity is always about being ourselves, rather than about helping other people to be something other than they actually are. And accept the ugly bits of ourselves. We're all human, and that means by definition that we're often messy and rough around the edges. And the only thing to do with our imperfections is to accept them, embrace them with forgiveness and compassion. Loving and accepting ourselves and all of our flaws is, in the end, the only thing that enables us to be real and authentic. Our blessing. Creator God, you have promised strength for the weak, rest for the labourers, light for the way, grace for our trials, help from above, unfailing sympathy and undying love. Help us then to go from this place continuing in your promise. Amen.